My name's Ethan Caldwell, 34, an investigative journalist out of Tufert, Montana, where the mountains hide secrets as dark as the men who keep them. I've built my life chasing truth, exposing corrupt senators, shady CEOs, and cartels who'd kill to silence me. My bylines in the Washington Post and Rolling Stone aren't just stories, they're battles, each one carving my name deeper into the world's underbelly. But the fight I never saw coming wasn't in some Mexican border town or corporate boardroom. It was in my own family with the people who were supposed to love me most. 7 years ago, I met Sophie at a Denver journalism conference. She was all fire and ideals, tearing into my arguments with a PhD student's precision. By midnight, we were trading stories over cheap beer, her laugh cutting through my cynicism. We married a year later, against her parents' wishes. Victor and Margaret Hensley, old money titans, saw me as a stain on their legacy. Victor, a hedge fund king, measures worth in billions. Margaret, a socialite with a smile like a blade, chairs charities while burying secrets. To them, I'm a muckraker, too reckless for their daughter. They wanted a Wall Street heir, not a guy with a laptop and a Glock chasing leads that don't pay for private jets. I've tried to fit their mold, brought scotch to their dinners, shared my exposés, played the dutiful son-in-law. But Victor's jabs about my hobby and Margaret's backhanded compliments never stop. I overheard her once, sighing that Sophie could have had a senator's son. Victor warned my work endangers Sophie's future, his eyes daring me to flinch. I didn't. I love Sophie, her strength, her belief in a better world, and I'd walk through fire to prove I'm enough. But love doesn't shield you from betrayal. It started with a sabotaged car, brakes cut on an icy Montana road, nearly sending me off a cliff. Then a gunman's bullets outside a gala, missing me by inches. The real blow came when Margaret handed me a special cocktail at her birthday, her hands trembling as she poured in something deadly. I swapped glasses with Victor, watched him collapse, and saw the truth in her panic. She'd meant to kill me. The fentanyl, the lab said, enough to stop my heart. Now I'm digging, uncovering Margaret's ties to a crime syndicate, dodging their thugs, and fighting to keep Sophie from her parents' grip. They've framed me, smeared me, even firebombed my home. But I've got evidence, footage, emails, their own words, and a fire they can't extinguish. This isn't just about survival. It's about exposing the rot in their empire and protecting the family Sophie and I are building. They underestimated me, big mistake. I'm Ethan Caldwell, and I don't stop until the story's told. The brakes screamed, then nothing. My rental car hurtled down the icy Montana back road, tires skidding on black ice, the steering wheel useless in my hands. I pumped the pedal, dead. The cliff edge loomed ahead, a jagged maw of rock and darkness. My pulse thundered, every instinct screaming to survive. I yanked the handbrake, the car fishtailing wildly, gravel spraying like shrapnel. The front bumper clipped a pine, spinning me to a stop inches from the drop. My breath came in ragged gasps, the cold air burning my lungs. I sat there, gripping the wheel, staring into the void below. Someone had cut my brakes. Someone wanted me dead. I'm Ethan Caldwell, 34, investigative journalist based in Toyfort, Montana. My name's been on bylines in the Washington Post, The Atlantic, and half a dozen other outlets that make powerful people sweat. I've exposed crooked senators, shady CEOs, and drug lords who'd rather see me in a ditch than a newsroom. But this wasn't some cartel thug or corporate fixer. This was personal, and the only people I'd pissed off lately were my in-laws, Margaret and Victor Hensley. Let me back up. I'd just returned from a month in Juarez, Mexico, embedded with a DEA task force tracking a fentanyl pipeline. I'd seen things down there. Bodies stacked in warehouses, kids hooked on laced pills, cops on the take, that made sleep a luxury. My latest piece, a 10,000-word expose on a cartel's ties to American pharma, was set to drop in Rolling Stone next week. It was the kind of story that could win a Pulitzer or get me killed. Maybe both. I was bone tired, my duffel still unpacked, when Sophie, my wife, insisted we couldn't miss her mother's birthday gala. It's one night, Ethan, she said, her green eyes pleading. They're family. I wanted to argue to tell her that her parents' colonial mansion in Two Fort's ritzy Elk Ridge district felt more like a snake pit than a home. But Sophie's loyalty to her folks was a steel cable, and I wasn't about to snap it. So I showered, threw on a blazer, and we drove out. The Hensleys are old money, the kind that buys influence and buries secrets. Victor, Sophie's dad, runs a hedge fund that moves billions. His name whispered in boardrooms from New York to Dubai. He's got a handshake like a vice and eyes that weigh your net worth before you speak. Margaret, her mom, is a socialite queen, all pearls and practiced smiles, cherrying charities while sipping martinis to them, I'm a problem. A scrappy journalist with ink-stained hands and a bank account that doesn't impress. Victor wanted Sophie to marry a Wall Street bro or a senator's kid, someone with a Rolex and a trust fund, not a guy who chases truth for a living. Margaret's subtler, but her digs cut deeper. At every family dinner, she introduces me as Ethan, the reporter, like I'm a hired hand, not her son-in-law. He's heard her on the phone sighing to friends about how Sophie could have had Preston Langley, the senator's boy. 7 years into our marriage, and they still treat me like a phase Sophie'll outgrow. We met at a journalism conference in Denver, 2018. I was presenting on whistleblower protections. Sophie was finishing her PhD in public policy, all fiery idealism and sharp questions. She challenged me during Q&A, tore into my argument about press freedom versus national security. By the end of the night, we were sharing beers at a dive bar, laughing over our differences. She got my need to dig, to expose the rot in the world. I'd admired her drive to fix it through policy, to make systems fairer. We were married a year later, against her parents' wishes. Victor pulled me aside at the reception, his bourbon breath hot on my face. "You're not what we planned for her, son. Don't drag her down with you." I smiled, shook his hand, and promised myself I'd prove him wrong. I've tried. God, have I tried. I bring aged scotch to their dinners, share clips of my stories, mention interviews with cabinet members. Nothing shifts their view. Victor grills me on my income, smirking when I dodge, exposing corruption's noble, Ethan. But it doesn't pay for private schools. Margaret's worse. She'll compliment my latest piece, then ask when I'm settling into something stable for Sophie's sake. Last Christmas, I overheard her on a call, voice low. Sophie could have had Preston, family connections, real security, but she chose the idealist. The way she spat idealist made it sound like a slur. I never told Sophie. She loves her parents, flaws and all, and I didn't want her caught in a tug of war. So I grit my teeth, play nice, and wait for the day they'll see me as more than a mistake. That night, driving to the gala, I was already on edge. The Mexico job had left me paranoid. Every shadow felt like a tale, every stranger a threat. When the brakes failed, it wasn't just bad luck. I popped the hood later, after a tow truck hauled me to safety. The brake lines were sliced clean, professional work. I called my editor, Dana, told her to lock down my files. "You're spooked," she said. "Cartels don't follow you to Montana." Maybe not. But someone had targeted me, and the gala was the only place I was expected to be. Sophie was shaken, but chalked it up to a fluke. "Old rental cars, Ethan." "You're reading too much into it." I didn't argue. She didn't need to know I had already texted a buddy at the sheriff's office to pull traffic cams. The Hensley estate was lit up like a movie set. All chandeliers and manicured lawns, valets in bow ties, parked Audis and Teslas, women in gowns glided past men in tailored suits. Sophie looked stunning in emerald silk, her auburn hair pinned up, but her smile was tight. She knew her parents' events were a gauntlet for me. Inside, the air smelled of money, cologne, champagne, and fresh orchids. Victor greeted us, his silver hair gleaming, his handshake a challenge. "Ethan, good to see you survived Mexico," he said, smirking. Heard cartels don't take kindly to nosy reporters. I forced a laugh. Takes more than that to scare me off. Margaret swept in, air kissing Sophie, her eyes sliding over me. Ethan, you're here. How dedicated. Her tone said I was an uninvited guest. The night dragged. Victor held court, boasting about a $2 billion 0 cents deal with a Saudi prince. Margaret flitted between guests, her laughter too bright, her eyes darting to me every few minutes. Sophie's brother, Nathan, and his wife, Claire, made small talk, but Nathan's jabs about my crusader complex stung. I sipped club soda, counting the minutes until we could leave. Then Margaret appeared, holding 2 flutes of something amber and fizzy. Ethan, I made this just for you, she said, her smile sharp as a blade. A special cocktail for our favorite journalist. Her fingers trembled as she handed me the glass, her eyes flicking to the kitchen door. I froze. I'd seen that look before, in Juarez, when a dealer thought he'd slip me a spiked drink. My gut screamed danger. I glanced at the glass, tiny bubbles rising, a faint sheen on the surface like oil on water. Thanks, Margaret, I said, keeping my voice light. Looks unique. She watched me, expectant, her lips parted slightly. I turned to Victor, who was distracted, scrolling his phone. Hey, Victor, you've got to try this. Margaret's outdone herself. Before he could protest, I swapped our glasses, setting the tainted one in front of him. He shrugged, raised it in a mock toast, and downed half in one gulp. Margaret's face went white. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. I almost doubted myself. Maybe it was just a bad mix, a paranoid reflex from too many close calls. Then Victor coughed, hard, his hand clutching his chest. His face turned ashen, sweat beading on his brow. He stood, swaying, and collapsed, the glass shattering on the marble floor. Guests screamed. Sophie rushed to his side. Dad! Somebody call 911! Margaret stood rooted, her eyes locked on me, not Victor. In that moment, I knew. She'd meant that drink for me, and it wasn't just to make me sick. Paramedics stormed in, barking orders, strapping Victor to a gurney. His pulse was thready, his breathing shallow. Sophie clung to my arm, sobbing. What happened, Ethan? He was fine. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was racing, replaying Margaret's trembling hands, the sheen in the glass. As they wheeled Victor out, I slipped into the kitchen, heart pounding. The chaos covered my tracks. I found the sink where Margaret had prepped the drinks, spotted a tiny vial half hidden behind a wine bottle. I pocketed it, along with my untouched glass, wrapping it in a napkin. Evidence. If I was right, this wasn't just family drama. This was attempted murder. Outside, the night air hit like a slap. Sophie was with Nathan, waiting for news from the hospital. I told her I'd follow in our car, needing a moment to think. I was halfway to the parking lot when a crack split the air. A gunshot. I dove behind a Mercedes, my pulse spiking. Another shot, this one pinging off the hood. A figure in a black balaclava sprinted into the shadows, boots crunching on gravel. I stayed low, my Mexico instincts kicking in. Whoever cut my brakes wasn't done. I waited, counting seconds until the lot was silent. My hands shook as I dialed my sheriff contact. Mike, I need you to pull every camera in Elkridge. Someone just took a shot at me. At the hospital, Victor was in ICU, intubated, fighting for his life. Doctors suspected poisoning, but couldn't pinpoint it yet. Sophie was a wreck, her face buried in her hands. Margaret hovered, her makeup streaked, her eyes avoiding mine. It must have been bad, Shellfish, she stammered to a nurse. Victor's always been sensitive. Bullshit. I'd seen fentanyl overdoses in Juarez. Sweating, convulsions, respiratory failure. The symptoms matched. I slipped away, found a quiet corner, and called my old college buddy Jason, who ran a toxicology lab in Bozeman. I'm overnighting you a glass and a vial, I said. Test for everything, especially opioids. He didn't ask questions. You owe me a beer, Caldwell. And a story. The next morning, Sophie and I crashed at a hotel. She was too shaken to go home, and I wasn't sure our condo was safe. Victor was stable but unconscious. The hospital ran talk screens, but Margaret's influence, donations to the board, friends in high places meant results were delayed. I didn't trust it. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Preliminary results, fentanyl in the glass, enough to kill a horse. Files, the same. Where the hell did you get this? I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. Margaret hadn't just tried to knock me out. She'd tried to erase me. I dug into her quietly. Margaret wasn't just a socialite. She sat on the board of a pharma giant, Verentis Labs, which had been flagged in my Mexico research for funneling precursors to cartels. Coincidence? I didn't believe in those. I hacked into her public financials. Offshore accounts, shady LLCs, payments to a known fixer in Chicago. She was dirty, and Victor knew it. He'd covered her tracks for years, their marriage a fortress of mutual secrets. But why target me now? My Rolling Stone piece hadn't named Verentis, but it was close. Too close. Had they gotten wind of it? Or was this just their latest move to pry Sophie away from me? Sophie didn't know. I couldn't tell her, not yet. She was grieving, scared, and her parents' grip on her was ironclad. If I accused Margaret without ironclad proof, Sophie might turn on me. I'd seen it before. Her loyalty to them was a reflex built over years of manipulation. Victor's warning echoed. Don't drag her down with you. Maybe they thought killing me was cleaner than waiting for a divorce. I lay awake that night, the hotel room's shadows pressing in, wondering who else they'd paid to come for me. The gunman was still out there. The brake cutter, too. And Margaret's eyes at the gala, cold, calculating, haunted me. She knew I'd swapped the glasses. She knew I was onto her. I needed answers. Why fentanyl? Why now? What was Margaret hiding, and how deep did Victor's complicity run? Most importantly, who else was on their payroll, waiting for a second shot? I checked my pistol, tucked it into my waistband, and stared at the vial on the nightstand. This wasn't just about surviving. It was about exposing the truth, no matter how ugly. The Hensleys had underestimated me. That was their first mistake. It wouldn't be their last. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed like a swarm of wasps, casting stark shadows across Victor Hensley's ICU room. He lay there, tubes snaking from his arms, monitors beeping in a steady rhythm that mocked the chaos in my head. Fentanyl. Enough to kill a horse, Jason's text had said. And yet Victor was alive, his eyes fluttering open as I stood in the doorway, Sophie clutching my arm. Margaret hovered by his bedside, her face a mask of concern. But her glance at me was pure She knew I'd swapped the glasses. She knew I'd taken the evidence. And now, with Victor stirring, the game was shifting. Food poisoning, Victor croaked to the doctor, his voice weak but deliberate. Must have been the shrimp. The lie was so blatant it almost made me laugh. Sophie frowned, her grip tightening. Dad, you didn't eat shrimp, it was steak. Victor waved her off, his eyes locking on mine. Bad batch, then. These things happen. Margaret nodded, too quickly. Yes, darling, let's not make a fuss. I stayed silent, my hand in my pocket, fingers brushing the vial I'd swiped from the kitchen. The doctor scribbled notes, oblivious to the war brewing under his nose. Victor was covering for Margaret, and I was the only one who saw it. Or so I thought. Back at the hotel, Sophie was a wreck, pacing the room, her auburn hair falling loose from its pins. Ethan, what's going on? First your car, then the shooting, now Dad? This isn't normal. Her voice cracked, and I wanted to tell her everything. The fentanyl, Margaret's trembling hands, the syndicate ties I'd started uncovering. But her eyes were raw, her trust in her parents a fragile thread. If I pushed too hard, I'd lose her. I'm working on it, I said, hating how vague it sounded. Just stay close, okay? She nodded, but the doubt in her gaze cut deeper than any bullet. I didn't sleep. My laptop glowed in the dark, my fingers flying as I dug into Margaret's world. Varentis Labs wasn't just a pharma giant, it was a front. Shell companies, offshore accounts, and a Chicago fixer named Vincenzo Vinny Russo linked her to a Midwest crime syndicate. They weren't just moving fentanyl precursors, they were flooding the streets with the finished product, raking in billions while kids overdosed in towns like Tayfort. My Rolling Stone piece had skirted too close, naming a supplier 1 degree removed from Varentis. Had Margaret panicked, thinking I was onto her? Or was this about Sophie, about saving her from a husband who didn't fit their gilded mold? Either way, the breaks, the gunman, the drink, they weren't random. They were a campaign. The next morning, my phone rang. Victor, sounding stronger than he had any right to. Ethan, we need to talk. Man to man, my office, noon. I almost hung up, but his tone wasn't a request. It was a threat. Fine, I said, checking the Glock in my nightstand. I wasn't walking into his lair unarmed. Victor's office was a cathedral of wealth, mahogany walls, a view of Tayfort's snow-capped peaks, and a desk that probably cost more than my condo. He sat there, pale but upright, a king reclaiming his throne. You're a problem, Ethan, he said, pouring himself a bourbon. Poking around where you don't belong. I leaned back, forcing calm. You mean the drink your wife spiked? Or the fact you're lying to cover her ass? His eyes narrowed, but he didn't flinch. Drop this, or I'll bury you. I know editors, publishers, senators. One call, and your career's ash. No more bylines, no more crusades. The threat landed like a punch, but I'd heard worse in Juarez. You're protecting a murderer, Victor. That's a hell of a hill to die on. He smirked, sipping his drink. You've got no proof. And Sophie? She'll never believe you over us. I stood, my voice low. Keep pushing, and you'll see how much proof I've got. I left, his laughter trailing me out. My next move was Margaret. She called that afternoon, her voice syrupy, inviting me to shoot a promotional video for her charity Hope Rising. It's for the children, Ethan. You're so talented with a camera. The flattery was a trap, but I agreed. If I could get her alone, I could force answers. The shoot was set at an old community center, its cavernous hall rigged with lights and a stage. I arrived early, my camera bag slung over my shoulder, my senses on high alert. The crew seemed off. Too many glances, too much whispering. I was framing a shot when a creak echoed above. Instinct kicked in. I dove left as a 500-pound light fixture crashed where I'd stood, splintering the floor. Dust choked the air, crew members shouting. But I saw Margaret in the corner, her face unreadable. Accident? No way. This was strike 3. I cornered her backstage, the lab report and her Varentis financials in my hand. Fentanyl, Margaret. Enough to kill me. And these? I slapped the papers down. Your syndicate buddies won't be happy when this hits the press. Her mask cracked, her voice a hiss. You're a liability, Ethan. Sophie deserves better. A real man, not a paranoid scribbler chasing ghosts. I stepped closer, my anger cold. You tried to murder me to save her? Say it! She laughed, bitter. I wanted you gone. Dead, disgraced, doesn't matter. She'd thank me someday. I recorded every word on my phone, hidden in my pocket. Confess to Victor, or this goes public. Your call. She stared, calculating, then turned away. I'd won the round, but the war was far from over. Margaret struck back fast. By evening, a smear campaign hit social media. Anonymous posts claiming I was unstable, abusive, cheating on Sophie with a source in Mexico. Local news picked it up, quoting family friends who called me a danger. Sophie saw it before I could explain, her face pale as she scrolled her phone. Ethan, is this true? They say you're unhinged. The hurt in her voice gutted me. It's Margaret's playbook, Soph. Lies to break us. I showed her the lab report, the vial, my recording. She listened, tears welling, but doubt lingered. I need time. she whispered, retreating to the bathroom. I'd given her truth, but her parents' grip was a vice. That night, our condo exploded. A firebomb, the cops said, hurled through the window. Flames devoured my files, my laptop, years of work. We barely escaped, coughing through smoke, Sophie trembling in my arms. The arsonist was gone, but the message was clear: stop digging or die. I moved us to a safe house, a cabin owned by my editor, Dana, deep in the Bitterroot Valley. Sophie was silent, her trust fraying, and I was running out of time to prove I wasn't the villain her parents painted. Hope came from an unexpected source. Claire, Nathan's wife, emailed me an encrypted file at 3 a.m. "You're not crazy," her message read. "They did this to me, too." The file was security footage from the Hensley estate, time-stamped the night of the gala. There was Margaret, clear as day, pouring powder into my glass, her movements deliberate. Another clip showed Victor, post-hospital, raging at her. "They botched it, Margaret! He's still breathing, and now he's got evidence." A third clip chilled me. Them plotting to frame me for embezzling from Hope Rising, planting fake bank records to make it stick. Victor's voice was cold. "He's not the first, Margaret. Remember the lawyer?" My blood ran cold. Sophie's ex. A lawyer who disappeared. Not just a breakup. Claire called me, her voice low. "They tried to ruin my marriage to Nathan, said I wasn't suitable. It almost worked. I stayed quiet because I was scared. But I can't watch them destroy you, too." I thanked her, my mind racing. The lawyer, his name was Daniel Reese. I tracked him down through an old contact at the DA's office. He was alive, barely, living off-grid in Idaho. Over a crackling phone line, he sent me emails from his time with Sophie, forged texts, planted evidence, all orchestrated by the Hensleys to make her think he'd cheated. "They're monsters," he said. "They'll kill you before they let her go." The syndicate wasn't done with me either. Driving back from the safe house, I was ambushed. A black SUV rammed my truck off the road into a ditch. Two thugs dragged me out, fists flying. "Drop this story, Caldwell, or you're done." I fought back, my Glock jamming, but a passing trucker's headlights spooked them off. I limped away, bruised but alive, my resolve hardening. They'd underestimated me, just like Margaret had. Victor's next move was legal. His lawyers slapped me with a defamation suit, claiming my lies about Margaret were ruining their reputation. The summons came with a private note. "Take the deal, Ethan. $5 million, 0 cents to walk away. Sophie stays with us." I met him at his country club, his bourbon glass gleaming under the chandelier. "Money or misery," he said, sliding a contract across the table. I laughed, pulling a USB from my pocket. "I've got backups, Victor. Footage, emails, your wife's confession. Even your syndicate pals won't save you." His face darkened, but he leaned in, voice low. "Ask Sophie about Daniel. Ask why he vanished. History repeats, son." The insinuation landed like a blade. Had Sophie known more than she'd let on? Piled everything. Claire's footage, Daniel's emails, my recording, the Varentis financials, into a dossier. I wasn't just fighting for my life now, I was fighting for Sophie's freedom from her parents' control. But Nathan, Sophie's brother, threw a wrench. He cornered me at the safe house, accusing me of forging the evidence. "You're tearing our family apart, Ethan. Those videos are fake." His loyalty to Victor blinded him, and Sophie, caught in the crossfire, wavered. "If you're lying," she said, her voice breaking, "I'm done. I can't do this." The ultimatum crushed me, but I had one card left to play. I gathered them. Sophie, Nathan, Claire. At the safe house, my laptop hooked to a TV. "Watch," I said, hitting play. The footage rolled. Margaret's poison, Victor's complicity, their embezzlement plot. Then the bombshell. Victor admitting Margaret had handled Daniel, and Margaret vowing to turn Sophie against me. Sophie's face crumpled, tears streaming. Nathan shook his head, muttering, "No, no, it's not them." Claire gripped his arm. "It's true, Nathan. They did it to us too." I didn't stop there. I played Daniel's emails, showed the Varentis records, my voice steady. "They've controlled you both your whole lives. It ends now." Sophie confronted her parents the next day, me at her side, a hidden recorder in my pocket. Their mansion felt like a mausoleum, all polished surfaces and dead air. Margaret tried gaslighting, her voice sweet. "Darling, Ethan's manipulated you. Those videos are edited." Victor backed her, his tone patronizing. "He's jealous, Sophie, always has been." But Sophie wasn't their puppet anymore. "I saw you, Mom. Pouring it. I heard you, Dad, planning to frame him." Her voice shook, but she stood tall. "You don't own me anymore." I played the recorder, their denials crumbling as their own words echoed. Margaret sobbed, not from guilt, but defeat. Victor's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. For the first time, they were cornered. In the silence, Sophie dropped her final blow. "I'm pregnant, Ethan and you'll never control our child." The shock on their faces was raw. Margaret reaching for her, Victor frozen. I stepped forward, my voice low. "This ends here. No more games, no more threats, or everything, your syndicate, your lies, goes public." Victor nodded once, a king dethroned. Days later, a deed arrived. Our condo, now ours, and a trust fund for our unborn child. No strings. It wasn't an apology, it was surrender. My expose hit, a 15,000-word beast in Rolling Stone, linking Varentis to the syndicate, naming Margaret as a key player. It went viral. Their empire crumbling, stocks tanked, investigations launched, their social circle scattering. Two-Furt's elite shunned them, their gala invitations drying up. But questions lingered, hooks in my mind. Who'd ordered the hit? Margaret? Victor? Or someone higher in the syndicate? Was Victor licking his wounds or plotting revenge? What was in Margaret's locked office safe, glimpsed in Claire's footage? Why had Daniel vanished so completely, and what did Sophie know about it? And Claire, her help was crucial, but her hesitance hinted at secrets of her own. That night, Sophie curled against me in the safe house, her hand on her belly. "I'm sorry I doubted you," she whispered. I was scared. I kissed her forehead, the weight of the fight easing. "We're free now, Soph. All three of us." Outside, Montana's stars burned bright. The Bitterroots' silence a promise. I'd face their poison, their bullets, their lies, and come out standing. Not because I played their game, but because I refused to. The truth was my weapon, and I'd wielded it to carve a future for my family. Whatever came next, syndicate, revenge, or secrets yet uncovered, I was ready. They'd learn what happens when you underestimate a man who lives for the story.